My dad is a driving instructor. I found his logbook. The driving school is a front he uses to scout wealthy neighborhoods for a burglary ring. He'd come home every evening smelling like cheap pine air freshener and the faint, sour tang of nervous sweat that wasn't his own. His work polo, a faded blue thing with Safe Wheels Driving Academy embroidered over the heart, was always a little rumpled. He'd drop his keys in the ceramic bowl by the door with a familiar clatter, sigh the sigh of a man who'd spent 8 hours telling teenagers to check their blind spots, and ask me what was for dinner. For 17 years, that was the rhythm of my life. The predictable, slightly boring metronome of my dad's existence was the background music to my own. He was just Dad, a man who lectured me about tire pressure and the proper following distance, who once made a 3-point turn in our driveway just to demonstrate the principle of it for the 5th time. He was painfully, reassuringly normal. I even helped him out sometimes. When I was saving up for a new laptop, I'd spend afternoons in the tiny, stuffy office he rented in a strip mall between a laundromat and a nail salon. I'd answer the phones, my voice a practiced monotone of politeness. Safe Wheels Driving Academy, this is Leo. How can I help you? I'd schedule lessons for kids with names like Braden and Madison, their anxious parents on the other end of the line grilling me about my dad's safety record and cancellation policy. It was all so mundane. The scent of stale coffee, the whir of an ancient printer, the stack of DMV manuals in the corner. It was a small, unassuming business run by a small, unassuming man. My dad. The discovery happened on a Tuesday. I was looking for a spare car charger. I knew he kept a box of old electronic junk in the bottom drawer of his filing cabinet in his home office, a room that was more of a glorified closet packed with paperwork. I was rummaging through a tangle of graying cables and obsolete phone adapters when my fingers brushed against the smooth spine of a notebook. It was just a plain black moleskin, the kind you get at any bookstore. It wasn't a standard lesson logbook. Those were big, spiral-bound things with printed columns. This was something different, something personal. Curiosity got the better of me. I figured it was just his own notes, maybe ideas for the business. I flipped it open. The first page was dated 6 months ago. The entry was for a street I recognized, one of those winding roads up in the hills where the houses have gates and names instead of numbers. It read, 1428 Willow Creek Lane. Student, Chloe M. Notes, 2 cars, BMW and Range Rover. No dog heard. Back patio door, single pane glass visible from neighbor's yard. Elderly couple, lights out by 9. Motion light on garage flickers. I frowned. It was weirdly specific. Why would a driving instructor note the type of glass on a patio door? I turned the page. Another student, another wealthy address. 915 Silverwood Drive. Student, Jackson T. Notes, landscapers every Mon/Thursday a.m. Side gate lock is cheap. Alarm system keypad visible from front window, looks old. Family friend mentioned they're going to Aspen for 2 weeks in February. My breath caught in my throat. I kept flipping, my heart starting to hammer against my ribs like a trapped bird. Page after page, it was the same thing. It wasn't about driving, not really. The students were just the excuse, the key to get inside these gated communities, to cruise slowly down these private lanes without suspicion. He was casing them. The notes were a detailed, horrifying inventory of vulnerabilities. He'd even sketched little layouts of some properties, marking camera blind spots and potential entry points. The clean, familiar loop of his handwriting, the same handwriting from every birthday card I'd ever received, was now describing how to break into a family's home. The air in the small room felt thick, unbreathable. I felt a wave of nausea so intense I had to grip the edge of the desk to keep from falling. That's when I heard it. The sound of his sensible sedan pulling into the driveway, the crunch of tires on gravel. Panic, cold and sharp, shot through me. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the notebook back into the drawer and under the mess of cables. I slammed it shut just as the front door opened. I stood up, trying to force the blood back into my face, trying to look like I'd just been searching for a charger. He walked in, dropping his keys in the bowl with that same old clatter. He smiled at me, a tired, familiar smile. "Hey, kiddo," he said, loosening his tie. "Long day? What's for dinner?" I stared at him, at the man who taught me how to parallel park, the man who held my hand when I was sick, and for the first time in my life, I was looking at a complete and utter stranger, a monster hiding in plain sight, and I had no idea what to do. I must have stood there for 10 full seconds, my mind a screeching, static-filled void. His question, so mundane, so utterly normal, felt like a slap. "What's for dinner?" He was asking me about spaghetti or frozen pizza, while the architecture of my entire life was collapsing into dust around my feet. My mouth was dry, my tongue felt thick and useless. The smell of his cheap car air freshener, a scent I'd always associated with safety and the end of a workday, now smelled like deceit. I managed to croak out a single word, a word that felt like a betrayal to the screaming panic in my chest. "Spaghetti?" It came out as a whisper. He didn't seem to notice. He just nodded, running a hand through his thinning hair, and headed towards the living room to switch on the TV, the picture of a man unwinding after a long day of meticulously planning felonies. Making dinner was an out-of-body experience. My hands found the pot, filling it with water, shaking pasta into the boiling bubbles. Every sound was magnified. The clatter of the colander in the sink sounded like a gunshot. The sizzle of garlic in the pan was a hiss of accusation. I felt like I was watching myself from the ceiling, a scared kid playing house, while a predator sat in the next room, channel surfing. When I called him to the table, he came in, sat in his usual chair, and unfolded his napkin. He looked at the plate of pasta I set before him and smiled, that same tired smile. "Looks great, Leo. Thanks." The words were so normal, so paternal, that for a terrifying second, I thought I'd imagined the whole thing. Maybe I'd fallen, hit my head, and hallucinated the notebook. But then he started talking. "Tough one today," he said, twirling spaghetti onto his fork with practiced ease. "Had that Chloe girl again, up on Willow Creek. Sweet kid, but she's got a lead foot and the attention span of a gnat. Nearly took out a very expensive-looking mailbox." He chuckled, a low, rumbling sound that I'd heard 1,000,000 times, but this time it curdled in my stomach. 1428 Willow Creek Lane. Chloe, M. Back patio door, single pane glass. The words from the logbook scrolled through my mind like a news ticker from hell. I watched him chew, watched the way his jaw worked, the way he dabbed at his mouth with the napkin. Every familiar gesture was now alien, tainted. I was having dinner with a ghost. The man I knew as my father was gone, replaced by this chillingly effective imposter who could talk about a teenage girl's driving habits while mentally cataloging the weaknesses of her family's home security. I felt a phantom taste of bile at the back of my throat and pushed my own pasta around my plate, my appetite completely gone. The rest of the meal passed in a torturous haze. He talked about the rising price of gas, about a funny call he got at the office, about how Mrs. Henderson next door was letting her prize-winning roses get overgrown. I just nodded, making non-committal grunts, praying he wouldn't ask me any direct questions. My mind was racing, trying to stitch together a new reality from the wreckage of the old one. Who were these people he worked with? This burglary ring? How long had this been going on? Was my whole life, our house, my laptop, all of it, paid for with stolen jewelry and electronics from families in Aspen? The thought made me feel dirty, complicit. When dinner was over, I stood up so fast my chair scraped loudly against the floor. "I'll clean up," I said, my voice tight. I needed to do something, anything with my hands. I needed to not be looking at his face. Once in my room, I locked the door, the click of the bolt echoing the slamming shut of a chapter in my life. I leaned against the wood, my forehead cool against the paint, and took my first real breath since I'd heard his car in the driveway. The silence of my room, usually a comfort, felt thin and fragile. I kept expecting the door to burst open, for him to be standing there, the logbook in his hand, his friendly mask gone, revealing whatever was underneath. I waited for what felt like an hour, listening to the muffled sounds of the TV downstairs. The cheerful theme song of some game show drifted up, punctuated by his occasional laughter. The sound was obscene. I had to see it again. I had to be sure. Slipping out of my room, I crept down the hallway, each footstep a calculated risk. The floorboard outside my parents' bedroom, the one that always creaked, was a landmine I had to navigate. I held my breath as I passed the living room doorway, catching a glimpse of him silhouetted by the flickering blue light of the television, a beer in his hand, completely at ease. He looked so normal, it was terrifying. I slipped into his office, the darkness of the small room a welcome cloak. My hands, still trembling, fumbled in the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet, the metallic scrape of the drawer sliding open sounding like a scream in the quiet house. I found it, the smooth black moleskin. I didn't turn on the light, I just used the glow from my phone, my thumb swiping frantically through the pages until I found an entry from a few weeks back. It was for a house on a street I'd driven down with him a dozen times. He'd pointed it out once, commenting on the beautiful stonework. The entry was chillingly concise. 211 Valley Oak. Ethan. R. Notes. No visible cameras on south side. Dog is a small terrier, yappy but harmless, kept indoors. Window and ground floor study is often left cracked for ventilation. Owner mentioned a collection of antique watches. I closed the notebook, the soft thud of the cover sealing my fate. This was real. This was happening. I put the book back, burying it under the tangle of old chargers, and crept back to my room. As I shut my door, I saw him through the crack, still on the couch, laughing at some stupid joke on the TV. The man who taught me to ride a bike, who quizzed me for my history exams, was a predator who used teenagers as his cover. And I, his son, was the only one who knew. The weight of that knowledge felt like it was going to crush me right there on the floor. My next move, whatever it was, would define everything. I didn't sleep. That's an understatement. I lay in my bed, rigid, listening to the house settle. Every groan of the pipes, every sigh of the floorboards as the temperature dropped, was a footstep on the stairs. I imagined him standing outside my door, listening, somehow knowing that I knew. I tracked his movements through the familiar sounds of our nightly routine. The flush of the toilet, the gurgle of the sink as he brushed his teeth, the soft thud of his bedroom door closing. For the first time in my life, that sound didn't signal the end of the day. It signaled the caging of the monster. I stared at my ceiling, the plaster swirls I'd counted 1,000 times as a kid, now looking like storm clouds, and I wondered if he was lawning in his own bed thinking about back patio doors and yappy little dogs. The thought made my skin crawl. Sleep wasn't a refuge. It felt like a vulnerability I couldn't afford. The morning was worse. The sun streamed through my window with a kind of cheerful indifference that felt like a personal insult. I walked into the kitchen with the gritty feel of sleep deprivation behind my eyes, and he was already there, sitting at the table, reading the paper, a half-eaten piece of toast on his plate. He looked up and smiled. "Morning, slugger. Rough night?" My heart hammered against my ribs. Did he know? Was this a test? I forced a yawn, a theatrical, jaw-cracking thing that felt completely fake. Yeah, just weird dreams. It was the lamest lie I could have come up with, but it was all I had. "Tell me about it," he said, folding the paper. "I dreamed they moved the DMV to the top of a mountain, and I had to teach a kid to parallel park on a cliff edge." He laughed, and the sound was so normal, so dad, that the whiplash nearly sent me to my knees. He was a master. He could compartmentalize his life so perfectly that there were no seams, no cracks for the truth to leak out. He was a loving father and a criminal, and the two things existed in the same body without any apparent conflict. He finished his coffee, rinsed his mug in the sink, and grabbed his keys from the bowl by the door. Got a full day, starting with a new one over in Sterlingwood. Kid named Alex. Apparently he thinks the brake pedal is just a suggestion. He winked at me. Wish me luck. And just like that, he was gone. The front door clicked shut, and the silence he left behind was deafening. I stood frozen in the kitchen, listening to the sound of his car engine fade down the street. Sterlingwood. The name echoed in my mind. It was one of the newer, ultra-wealthy developments on the other side of the valley. Prime territory. I felt a surge of adrenaline, cold and sharp. This was my chance. The house was empty. The monster was out pretending to teach a teenager how to check his blind spots while he was actually casing a mansion. I had to find something more. The logbook was the what, but I needed the who and the when. I went straight to his office. The room felt different now, charged with a sinister energy. I didn't bother with the filing cabinet this time. My eyes scanned the desk, the neat stacks of paper, the pen holder, the coaster with a coffee ring on it. It was all a facade, a carefully constructed stage for his normal dad persona. My gaze landed on his personal laptop, closed and dormant next to a picture of me and my mom at the Grand Canyon. The hypocrisy was a physical blow. Then I saw it. His phone, left on the desk next to the laptop charger. He never, ever forgot his phone. It was like a third hand. He must have been distracted, in a hurry. My breath caught in my throat. This was it. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely pick it up. The screen was black, oily with his fingerprints. I pressed the side button. The screen lit up, a picture of our golden retriever, Buster, as the background. It asked for a passcode. My mind went blank with panic. Then a memory surfaced. His birthday. 0814. I typed it in, my thumb hovering over the last digit. I felt like I was picking a lock. Breaking into the last remaining part of my father's life that I hadn't yet seen was a lie. I pressed the 4. It clicked open. The screen glowed with a familiar grid of apps. Weather, news, email, a dumb-looking golf game. It was so mundane, so achingly normal, that for a split second I thought I might have imagined the whole thing. Maybe the logbook was a joke, a piece of creative writing from a man bored with his life. But my heart was still trying to beat its way out of my chest, and I knew that was just wishful thinking. I was holding the real version of my father, the unedited director's cut, and I was terrified of what I was about to watch. My thumb, slick with sweat, hovered over the green message icon. It was the most direct route. It was the one place where the mask might slip, where he might use his own words to condemn himself. I tapped it. A list of recent conversations appeared. Mom, with a string of heart emojis, my uncle talking about a fishing trip, a group chat with his buddies from the golf club, filled with bad jokes and blurry photos of fairways. It was a perfect portrait of a suburban dad. I scrolled, my breath held tight in my lungs, looking for anything out of place. And then I saw it. A thread with no name, just the initial J. The last message, from this morning, was just 2 words. Catalog updated. My blood ran cold. The catalog. The moleskin notebook. I tapped on the thread, and the world tilted on its axis. It was all there. A conversation stretching back months, written in a sterile, coded language that made my skin crawl. Valley Oak delivery went smooth. Client was very pleased with the watches. That was from a few weeks ago. A message from my dad. Good. Jay had replied. Payment sent. There were messages about other neighborhoods, other streets. The Henderson package is ready for pickup. Just need a date. Have you scouted the new listings on Crestview? It was a ledger of their crimes, a casual back and forth about destroying people's lives, interspersed with the occasional complaint about traffic or the weather. My dad wasn't just a bad man leading a double life. He was a monster who had completely integrated his monstrosity into the everyday. Suddenly, a loud thud from the front porch made me jump so hard I almost dropped the phone. My heart slammed against my ribs, a wild bird trapped in a cage. He was back. He forgot something else. I fumbled with the phone, my fingers like clumsy sausages, trying to lock the screen. I could hear footsteps on the walkway. I shoved the phone into my pocket, my mind racing. What do I say? Why am I in his office? The doorknob. I'll say I was looking for a pen. The excuse was so flimsy it was transparent. But the front door didn't open. I crept to the office window, peering through the blinds. It was just the mailman, dropping a heavy package on the welcome mat before tramping back to his truck. The relief was so profound it left me weak, my legs trembling. I leaned my forehead against the cool glass, taking a deep, ragged breath. I was running out of time. I pulled the phone back out, my hand shaking even more than before. I had to know more. I had to know how deep it went. I scrolled back further and further past dozens of transactional, soulless messages. Then I found one that stopped my breathing altogether. It was from about 6 months ago. The Miller kid was a gold mine, my dad had written to Jay, practically gave me a guided tour of the whole first floor, mentioned his mom's jewelry box is in the master closet, top shelf, easiest one yet. The Miller kid. That was Ben Miller. He was in my grade. I remember when his house got robbed. His family was devastated. They lost things that had been passed down for generations. And my dad had used Ben's trust, his teenage earnestness to learn a new skill, as a weapon against his family. He had sat in the passenger seat, nodding and smiling, while Ben pointed out the landmarks of his own home, never knowing he was showing a predator exactly where to strike. This was a different kind of evil. The logbook was cold, observational. This was personal. This was a violation of a trust so fundamental it felt sacred. The trust between a teacher and a student, a man who was supposed to be guiding him, keeping him safe. I felt a surge of white-hot rage, so pure and potent it almost choked me. I scrolled back to the top, to the most recent messages, needing to see what was happening now. What fire was he starting at this very moment? And there it was, sent by Jay just last night. Sterlingwood intel looks good. What's the timeline? My dad's reply, sent less than an hour before he'd walked out the door to ruin another kid's life, was the final nail in the coffin. The Alex kid says his folks are out of town this weekend. House will be empty. Friday night is perfect for the pickup. Friday? That was 2 days from now. This wasn't history anymore. It wasn't something I had just discovered. It was a crime in progress, a death sentence for a family's peace of mind. Friday night, a specific time, a specific place, a specific victim. It wasn't an abstract package or a faceless client anymore. It was the Alex kid. A kid. Someone my age. The phone in my hand felt impossibly heavy, like it was made of lead. The light from the screen cast a sickly blue glow on my face, illuminating the silent scream I couldn't let out. I had stumbled out of the past and fallen head first into the future, and it was a future my father was actively, methodically destroying. I felt a dizzying sense of vertigo, the office walls seeming to close in on me. I was the only person standing between a normal Thursday and a catastrophic Saturday for a family that had no idea what was coming for them. The responsibility was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest and making it hard to breathe. My first coherent thought was a frantic, desperate question. Who is Alex? The name was a ghost, a generic placeholder for a life about to be turned upside down. I couldn't warn a ghost. I needed a face, a last name, an address. My eyes darted around the office, landing on the moleskin logbook still sitting open on the desk. The catalog, of course. The phone gave me the what and the when, but the logbook held the who and the where. My hands, still trembling, put the phone down and reached for the notebook. I flipped through the pages, my fingers clumsy and slick with sweat. I wasn't just looking for evidence anymore. I was on a rescue mission, digging for intelligence. I found the current week's schedule. His familiar, neat block lettering filled the columns. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. All the names of kids from my school, from neighboring schools, each one a potential victim, a potential Ben Miller. My stomach churned. Then I saw it. Thursday, 4 p.m. Alex R., Collingwood and Sterling. The address. Alex R. The initial slammed into my brain, connecting dots I didn't even know were there. Alex Riley. He was in my English class. He sat 2 rows behind me, a quiet kid who always had his head buried in a book and never said much. He had ridiculously curly hair that he was always trying to push out of his eyes. I remembered him talking a few weeks ago, his voice uncharacteristically excited about finally getting his learner's permit. He'd been saving up for driving lessons for a year. I pictured him in the passenger seat of my dad's Toyota, just like Ben Miller. I could see him, earnest and focused, pointing out his own street, maybe even his own house with a sense of pride. Yeah, we're the 3rd house on the left, the one with the big oak tree. He wouldn't be showing off. He would just be making conversation, trusting the kind, patient man sitting next to him, the man who was mentally cataloging his family's possessions and planning the perfect moment to violate their home. The rage came back, cold and sharp this time, a shard of ice in my gut. My dad wasn't just an opportunist, he was a predator. He sought out the trusting ones, the quiet ones, the kids who wouldn't cause a fuss. He used their innocence as his skeleton key. I stood there, frozen in the silent office, the logbook in one hand, the phone on the desk. I had it all. The plan, the place, the time, the people involved. This was more than enough. I could go to the police. The thought was a sudden, blinding flash of light. I could walk out of this house, go straight to the station, and end it all. I imagined sitting in a sterile interrogation room, the phone and the logbook on a metal table between me and a skeptical-looking detective. I imagined the words tumbling out of my mouth, accusing my own father. And then I imagined the fallout. The phone call to my mom, the disbelief, the denial, then the soul-crushing realization. Her life, the comfortable, stable life she thought she had, would be obliterated in a single moment. Our family name would be dragged through the mud, forever linked to this filth. My dad would go to prison. Our house would be sold. My mom and I? What would even happen to us? The clear, simple path of going to the police suddenly became a tangled, thorny mess of consequences I couldn't bear to face. I would be destroying my mother's life to save Alex Riley's family's possessions. Was that a fair trade? The question was so monstrous, I felt sick. A floorboard creaked upstairs. It was probably just the house settling, but the sound was like a gunshot in the silence. I had to get out of here. He could come home at any second. I carefully closed the logbook, placing it exactly where I had found it. Then I picked up his phone. My fingerprint was all over it. I grabbed the sleeve of my hoodie and wiped it frantically, front and back, until the screen was a smeary but clean black mirror. I placed it back on the desk, right next to the laptop charger, angled just so. I tried to remember precisely how it had been sitting. Every detail mattered. I was covering my tracks, thinking like a criminal. The irony was so bitter it tasted like acid. I backed out of the office, pulling the door until I heard the quiet click of the latch and tiptoed back up the stairs, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I collapsed onto my bed, my body shaking with a toxic cocktail of adrenaline and fear. The image of Alex Riley's trusting face was burned into my mind. I couldn't go to the police, I couldn't destroy my mom, and I couldn't just sit here and let it happen. I couldn't let my dad and this J person ruin another family, not when I had the power to stop it. The feeling of helplessness was suffocating, but underneath it, something else was starting to form, a hard, cold knot of resolve. If I couldn't blow the whole thing up, if I couldn't stop the entire operation, then I would have to do something else. I would have to stop this one delivery, this one crime. I didn't know how. I had no resources, no one I could possibly tell. But as I lay there staring at the ceiling, the truth settled over me with absolute certainty. 2 days from now, on Friday night, I wasn't going to be sitting at home. I was going to be at Collingwood and Sterling, and I was going to stop my father. Sleep didn't come that night. How could it? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw a flip book of horrors. Ben Miller's vacant expression, the cold blue light of my dad's phone, the neat damning script in the logbook, and finally, Alex Riley's unsuspecting face, his brow furrowed in concentration as he practiced a three-point turn. I lay in my bed, rigid, listening to the sounds of the house, the hum of the refrigerator, the groan of the pipes, the whisper of wind against my window. These were the sounds of my home, of my entire life, and they all felt like lies. My father was sleeping just one room over, probably dreaming the peaceful, dreamless sleep of the man with no conscience. The thought that I shared blood with him made my skin crawl. The air in my own room felt thick, contaminated. I was breathing in the same air as a monster, and the only thing separating us was a few inches of drywall. The next day, Thursday, was a special kind of torture. I had to go to school. I had to pretend that my world hadn't imploded. I moved through the crowded hallways like a ghost, the chatter and laughter of my classmates sounding like it was coming from underwater. Everything felt trivial. People were stressed about a pop quiz in chemistry, gossiping about who was going to the movies on Friday. Friday. The word was a punch to the gut every time I heard it. While they were picking out what to wear, I was rehearsing a war in my head. I saw Alex in English class, just like I knew I would. He was sitting in his usual spot, 2 rows behind me, completely absorbed in a paperback novel before the bell rang. He absent-mindedly ran a hand through his mess of curls, pushing them off his forehead. He had no idea. He was worried about getting a good grade on his essay, while I was picturing his front door splintering, his mother's jewelry being swept into a canvas bag. The injustice of it was a physical weight. I wanted to scream, to walk over to him and tell him to get his family out of the house. But what would I say? Hey, my dad is a driving instructor who moonlights as a scout for a burglary ring, and he cased your house yesterday. You should probably cancel your Friday night plans. I would be committed. I just stared at the back of his head, a silent, useless guardian angel. When I got home from school, the house was empty. My mom was at work and my dad was out giving a lesson. He was probably with Alex right now for his 4 p.m. slot. The thought sent a fresh wave of nausea through me. I dropped my backpack by the door and knew I couldn't just sit here. I couldn't plan a defense from my bedroom. I needed to see the battlefield. I grabbed my bike from the garage, my hands feeling clumsy and disconnected from my body. Collingwood and Sterling. The address was burned into my brain. It was about a 20-minute ride into one of the nicer, older parts of town where the houses were set back from the road and the trees were ancient and enormous. I pedaled hard, the wind whipping at my face, feeling like I was trying to outrun the frantic thumping of my own heart. I told myself that if anyone asked, I was looking for a friend's house and got the street wrong. A simple, believable lie. It was terrifying how easy they were starting to come to me. I found the street easily. It was quiet, idyllic, the kind of street where kids leave their bikes on the lawn. I slowed down, coasting, trying to look casual, and then I saw it. The third house on the left, with a massive oak tree dominating the front yard, its branches like gnarled arms reaching for the sky. The Riley house. It was a nice 2-story brick house with a porch swing and neatly trimmed hedges. It looked safe. It looked like a home. I could see a light on in an upstairs window. Maybe that was Alex's room. I rode past it once, then circled the block and came back, my eyes scanning everything. The layout of the street, the distance between houses, the potential hiding spots. There was a thicket of bushes across the street, a dark little alleyway between 2 of the neighboring properties. I was thinking about sight lines and escape routes. My dad's methodical planning was seeping into me, a poison I had to swallow to find an antidote. Across the street and 2 houses down from the Rileys, a man was washing a dark blue sedan in his driveway. It was an older model, nothing fancy. An idea, cold and sharp and terrifying, began to form in my mind. A distraction. Something loud enough to spook them, to send them running before they could even get inside. Something that would bring neighbors to their windows and maybe even get someone to call the cops, but without me having to be the one to make the call. My gaze fixed on the sedan. A car alarm. It was perfect. It was anonymous. All it would take was a rock, a single, well-aimed rock. The simplicity of it was horrifying. I would be committing a crime to stop a bigger one. I had found my plan, and it scared me more than having no plan at all. I rode home in a daze, my legs pumping mechanically. The plan felt less like a stroke of genius and more like a tumor growing in my chest. A car alarm. A rock. It was so crude, so stupidly simple. I was going to vandalize a stranger's car, a man who had been peacefully washing it in his own driveway, just to create a sound, to create chaos. I was becoming a part of the darkness to fight it, and I wasn't sure if that was a line you could uncross. When I got home, my dad's car was in the driveway. He was back. I wheeled my bike into the garage, my movements stiff and robotic, and walked into the kitchen. He was standing at the counter, humming to himself as he sliced an apple. He looked up and smiled, the same easy, familiar smile he'd given me my whole life. "Hey, champ, good ride?" The word champ felt like a lie. I just nodded, unable to speak. He held out a slice of apple. "Want one?" I shook my head, my stomach churning. I saw his hands, the ones that held a steering wheel, that have probably shaken hands with the monster named Jay, and I felt a profound and terrifying distance from him. He was a stranger. He was my father. The two truths couldn't exist together, but they did. That night at dinner was the longest meal of my life. My mom was talking about a problem at the office, something about a new software system they were installing. She was animated, waving her fork around to make a point. I just stared at my plate, pushing a piece of chicken around with my fork. Every time my dad spoke, his voice calm and reasonable as he offered my mom advice, I flinched. It was a performance. All of it. He was playing the part of a loving husband, a caring father, and he was so damn good at it. "You're quiet tonight, Ben," my mom said, her brow furrowing with concern. I looked up, caught in the headlights. "Just tired," I mumbled. "Big chem test tomorrow." It was another lie, tumbling out of me before I even had time to think. My dad looked at me, a flicker of something in his eyes. Was it suspicion? Or was I just projecting my own guilt onto him? "Make sure you get some rest then. Big day tomorrow." The words hung in the air, thick with unspoken meaning. For him, a successful score. For me, a desperate, clumsy intervention. We were talking about the same Friday, but we were living in different worlds. Friday dragged on, each second stretching into an eternity. I sat through my classes, a ghost in my own skin. I saw Alex in the hallway between third and fourth period. He was laughing with a friend, his head thrown back, completely carefree. He had no idea that in a few hours his home would become a target, that his family's sense of security was about to be shattered. The weight of that knowledge was crushing. I felt like I was carrying a secret that was physically heavy, bending my spine. I wanted to run to him, to grab him by the shoulders and tell him not to go out tonight, to stay home, to put an extra lock on the door. But I couldn't. I was trapped in my silence, the unwilling keeper of his fate. All I could do was watch him walk away, disappearing into the anonymous river of students, and pray that my stupid, reckless plan would be enough. When I got home, I went straight to my room. My mom wouldn't be home for another hour. My dad was already gone, out on his last lesson of the day. I pulled on a pair of dark jeans and a black hoodie. Looking at my reflection in the mirror, I barely recognized the person staring back. My eyes were wide, my face pale and tight with anxiety. This was my uniform for the night, my battle gear. I felt like a fraud, a little kid playing a dangerous game he didn't understand. Then I went outside. I walked to the rock garden at the side of the house, my heart hammering against my ribs. I crouched down, my fingers tracing the cool, rough surfaces of the stones. I needed one that was just right. Not too big to throw, but not too small to be useless. I found it, nestled under a fern. It was about the size of my fist, a piece of gray granite with a sharp, angular edge. It felt heavy in my hand. Real. This was the tool I was going to use to commit a crime. I slipped it into the pocket of my hoodie, the weight of it a constant, terrifying reminder of what I was about to do. I went back inside and waited, watching the clock on my wall tick away the last minutes of my old life. At 8:30, I went downstairs. My mom was on the couch watching some reality show. "I'm heading over to Mark's house," I said, the lie feeling like a stone in my mouth. "We're going to work on that chem homework." She smiled, not looking away from the TV. Okay, sweetie, don't be too late. Love you. Love you too, I whispered, the words catching in my throat. I slipped out the front door, closing it gently behind me, and stepped out into the cold night. The world was quiet. I was completely and utterly alone. The ride to Alex's neighborhood was a journey through a tunnel of my own fear. The world outside the focus beam of my bike light was a blur of dark houses and skeletal trees. The only sounds were the hiss of my tires on the cold asphalt and the frantic, ragged sound of my own breathing. The rock in my hoodie pocket felt like it was radiating a cold energy, a small, dense piece of my own corruption. Each push of the pedals was a confirmation of my choice. I was no longer a bystander. I was an actor in this awful play, and I was about to walk onto the stage. I ditched my bike a block away, hiding it behind a large hedge, and approached on foot. The street was exactly as I remembered it from my scouting trip. Quiet, lined with manicured lawns and the soft glow of porch lights. It felt sacrilegious to be there, a shadow with a stone in my pocket, ready to tear a hole in the peaceful fabric of the night. I found the thicket of bushes across the street and slipped inside, the branches scratching at my face and arms. I had a clear, if partial, view of the Riley house and, more importantly, the dark blue sedan parked in the driveway 2 houses down. Now all I could do was wait. My heart was a drum solo against my ribs. Every passing car sent a jolt of panic through me. Was it them? Was it a cop? My mind was a whirlwind of worst-case scenarios. What if I missed? What if someone saw me? What if the alarm didn't work? Then I saw it. A familiar car, the one with the driving school logo on the side, cruised slowly down the street. My dad's car. It didn't stop, it just moved past, a predator assessing its hunting ground one last time before the attack. My breath caught in my throat. He was here. He was a part of this. Right now. A few minutes later, a dark, windowless van turned onto the street and parked a little ways down, its engine cutting out with a soft rumble that sounded like a growl in the silence. The side door slid open. 2 figures, dressed in black from head to toe, slipped out. They moved with a fluid, practiced silence that made my blood run cold. They weren't kids messing around. They were professionals. They started walking down the sidewalk, their path taking them directly toward the Riley front door. This was it. It was happening. I pulled the rock from my pocket. The granite was cold and solid in my trembling hand, an anchor in a sea of panic. I rose to a crouch, peering through the leaves. The 2 figures were at the edge of the Riley's lawn now, melting into the shadows near the porch. It was now or never. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my arm. I focused on the rear side window of the blue sedan. It was a dark, unblinking eye. I swung my arm back and threw the rock with every ounce of fear and rage I had in me. It flew through the air, a small, dark projectile on a desperate mission. For a terrifying half-second, there was only the sound of its flight, and then a sharp, explosive crack of shattering glass. The sound was louder than I could have ever imagined. It echoed down the silent street like a gunshot. A moment of stunned silence followed, and then the world erupted. The car alarm began to shriek, a piercing, frantic wah, wah, wah that ripped the night apart. Lights flicked on in the house with the sedan. A dog started barking hysterically a few houses down. The 2 figures on the Riley's lawn froze, silhouetted for a moment against the porch light. They looked at each other, then scrambled back toward the van. The van's engine roared to life, its tires squealed, and it peeled away into the darkness. Down the street, my dad's car pulled away from the curb just as quickly, disappearing in the opposite direction. It worked. I sank back into the bushes, my legs turning to jelly. I had done it. I stayed hidden, my body shaking uncontrollably, as the owner of the sedan, a man in a bathrobe, came running out of his house. He swore loudly when he saw the shattered window, his voice a mixture of anger and confusion. Other neighbors were peering out their front doors. My plan had worked perfectly, and I felt sick to my stomach. I had saved one family by victimizing another. I had thrown a rock into the quiet pond of this neighborhood, and the ripples of my actions were spreading out in the dark. As quietly as I could, I crawled out of the bushes and slipped away, my hoodie pulled low over my face. The ride home was a blur. The adrenaline was gone, replaced by a hollow, aching dread. I had crossed a line, and there was no going back. I let myself into my house, every nerve on fire. The house was dark and silent. I thought I was in the clear. I went to the kitchen to get a glass of water, my hand shaking so badly I could barely turn the tap. When I turned around, my heart nearly stopped. My dad was sitting at the kitchen table, shrouded in the darkness. He hadn't turned on a single light. The only illumination came from the faint moonlight filtering through the window, carving his face into a grim mask. He wasn't looking at me, just staring at his hands on the table. The driving school logbook was sitting on the table in front of him. He knew. "You have a good arm, Ben," he said. His voice was quiet, devoid of all emotion. It was worse than if he had been screaming. "You always were a good pitcher." I couldn't speak. The glass of water slipped from my fingers and shattered on the floor, the sound as loud and final as the car window. He didn't even flinch. He just slowly lifted his head and looked at me. His eyes weren't angry. They were something far more terrifying. They were empty. "I did it for you," he said, his voice a low rasp. "For you and your mom. To give you everything." The words hung in the air between us, a lie so profound it felt like it was sucking the oxygen from the room. I finally found my voice, a ragged whisper. "No," I said. "You did it for you." He just stared at me for a long moment, the silence stretching and breaking between us. The man I'd known my whole life, my father, was gone. In his place was this stranger, this hollowed-out man sitting in the dark. He slowly stood up, pushed the logbook across the table toward me, and walked out of the kitchen without another word. I was left alone, standing in the darkness amidst the broken glass, the low hum of the refrigerator the only sound in my ruined world. What do you do when the person you trust most in the world is the monster you are trying to stop? Let us know in the comments.
Don't forget to like and subscribe. I post new stories every day.